Tonight, the brutal reality of war. We unearth the story of a little girl and her family who, like many, simply longed for a normal life. We bring you a special report on the tragic events that led to a death of a 5-year-old Hind Rajab and her loved ones who dared to escape the fighting in Gaza. Her mother says she wants to find those responsible as we investigate whether Israel is doing enough to protect Palestinian lives.
I am calling on the whole world to stand with us in the case of Hind, so those who committed this brutal crime are held accountable. I need justice for my daughter.
I'll be joined by the Palestinian ambassador to the UK and ask the Israeli military whether they're doing enough to protect innocent people's lives. Also ahead on the programme. Beirut is pummeled from the air, whilst on the ground, Israeli soldiers move further into their neighbours' borders. It all comes as the head of MI5 recognises both Iran and Russia's influence as global threats and warns those who come to their aid of deadly consequences. And in the United States, we're live in Florida, where people are bracing themselves for another ferocious hurricane, still reeling from a superstorm. Good evening and welcome. I'm Yalda Hakim, live from Jerusalem, where it's now been over a year, one whole year since war gripped this region. Whether it be communities in Israel living in fear of rocket attacks, the dire situation in Gaza, or recent events in Lebanon, one thing is clear: the human cost of this conflict is truly spiraling out of control. Well, over 40,000 people have died in Gaza. Tonight, I want to focus on the life of one little girl. 5-year-old Hind Rajab, just an ordinary child, experienced an ordeal no one should ever have to. In a final phone call, she told the emergency services, "I'm so scared, please come and get me." She'd been travelling with her family in a car when it was shot at. She died without ever getting help because the paramedics sent to help her were also killed. The Israeli army insists they were not in the area at the time of the incident, but satellite imagery and geolocated footage from a now-deleted press release would suggest otherwise. In a moment, I'll get reaction from both the Israeli military and the Palestinian ambassador to the UK. But first, this investigation from our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey.
Much of Gaza lays in ruins. Attention may have moved away from here for now, but the conflict grinds on. Many have questioned Israel's alleged targeting and negligent killing of civilians in its conflict with Hamas. Buried in this rubble are the forgotten victims of this war. Often buried with them the stories of how they were actually killed. Some incidents are more high profile than others. This is the story of the death of one little girl. Her name is Hind Rajab, and she was 5. On January the 29th, with her uncle, aunt and 4 cousins, Hind crammed into a car to escape the fighting in the Tel Al-Hawa neighbourhood of Gaza City. Within minutes, they were attacked. Their bodies and destroyed car were found 350 metres away from their starting point. These pictures, filmed by Sky News journalists inside Gaza, show the destroyed car. The black Kia Picanto is covered in bullet holes. Dozens of entry holes can be seen on the right-hand side of the car. After the initial attack, 2 people were still alive. Hind and her 15-year-old cousin, Leanne, who spoke to the Palestinian Red Crescent, begging for help.
Hello? Hello, مرحبا عمو. Hello, مرحبا. الدبابة جنبك. انتوا متخبيين؟ في السيارة، احنا جنبين الدبابة. انتوا جوا السيارة؟ Hello? Hello?
With the phone line dead, the Red Crescent rang back. Hind answered. She was now alone in the car. The other family members all killed. 4 children and 2 adults. Over 3 hours, in multiple calls, the dispatcher stayed in touch with Hind, trying to comfort her, scared and alone.
أجي أخذك؟ حبيبتي طيب ما أنا يا حبيبتي رح أجي أخذك. هلا عمو من الهلال عماله عم بنصك عشان إحنا نقدر نيجي ناخذك. حواليكي في ضرب رصاص؟
Rana Farki was the Red Crescent worker talking to Hind. We met at their offices in the West Bank. Nobody here can forget that day.
In all my time of working, I've not cried as much as that day. I know Hind's not the only story. I believe there are many stories more distressing than this in Gaza, but it was difficult because I was the one handling it.
After hours waiting for permission from the Israeli authorities, the Red Crescent say they received that permission to send help. This is disputed. The IDF says given the lack of forces in the area, there was no need for an individual coordination of the ambulance's route. The ambulance left from the Al-Hali hospital at 5:40 p.m. It was attacked a few meters short of the family car some 20 minutes later. This is the destroyed ambulance. Both paramedics were killed. And this is their radio communication with the Red Crescent in their final moments.
خليك معي شايف السيارة أنت؟ مش شايف مشغل السرينة واللواح؟
Hind was left to die without help. Weapons experts told Sky News the damage shows the ambulance was hit with a large caliber weapon, with the projectile's exit hole visible at the back of the vehicle.
Any area it is announced as a military zone, we are completely denied access to it. So that's why we have to seek coordination. Without coordination to ensure safety of our teams, we could not send an ambulance.
Sky News has examined satellite imagery taken on the day of the attack. It shows at least 15 military vehicles in the Tel Al-Hawa neighborhood where the family's car was found. The closest military vehicle is just 300 meters away. This satellite image was taken at 4:31 p.m., just over an hour before the Red Crescent say they received approval to send an ambulance. Satellite imagery taken in the days following the attack show how a heavy military presence remained. At least 13 military vehicles on this day. A day later, at least 9 military vehicles are seen in the area near the Islamic University in Gaza City. The Israeli army said it was not in the area on the day of the incident. But their presence in the area was made public by them. 12 days after the attack, the IDF published a press release. It said over the last 2 weeks they conducted raids on terror targets with forces operating in Shati and Tel Al-Hawa neighborhoods in Gaza. The press release was later deleted from the IDF website. It's not clear why. Sky News has asked the IDF for comment. Further down the press release, the IDF embedded videos showing their movements in the area. Sky News geolocated the IDF footage released on the 10th of February, which shows 3 forces, the 401st Brigade, the Shayatet 13 and 52nd Battalion, operating less than 650 metres from the car Hind was found in. While it's not clear exactly what date the footage in the release was filmed, the IDF's presence in the area is undeniable. In response to this report, the IDF told Sky News it appears its forces were not present near the vehicle or within the firing range of the described vehicle, and that the incident has been passed on to a separate investigative body. Hind's mother wasn't in the car. There wasn't room. She escaped with Hind's little brother on foot. She wants someone to explain why her daughter was killed.
I am calling on the whole world to stand with us in the case of Hind, so those who committed this brutal crime are held accountable. I need justice for my daughter.
The Gaza war is in many ways unique as it's happening in a closed space with no escape. and no independent investigation on the ground about what is happening. What has happened and what secrets lie beneath the rubble may never be known. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News.
Well, joining me now live from Tel Aviv is spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces, Peter Lerner. Mr. Lerner, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. This incident is a tragic, horrific one known to the world, and we have obviously now done this report. But I want to ask you right now whether the IDF was in the area when this happened or not.
Yalda, thank you for the opportunity. Obviously, the dramatic images, the pain of the mother and the death of Hind is a true tragedy of this war. As we informed and as Stuart Ramsey rightly pointed out from our initial investigation, we did not find that on that day there were forces in that area, that there was any ability to conduct this alleged attack against the vehicle. It doesn't mean that there weren't gunmen around. It doesn't mean that there wasn't an exchange of fire. It doesn't mean that this vehicle perhaps wasn't caught in the crossfire between forces. But from what we understand now, and from the IDF investigation, no, there were no forces, and this is whatever it is. It's a tragedy for the family and for the outcome.
So you're saying, so Mr. Lerner, you're saying that IDF forces were not in the area at the time. That is despite satellite imagery conducted by Planet, I'm just going to pull it up on our screen, which does show IDF forces, the presence of IDF forces in the area on the day of this incident.
No, as I said, we have not found this to be actual. I don't know when these images, when they were taken. I can't confirm that. From our investigation, we were not in that area. I think that it's important
this satellite imagery. So I'm not talking about Sky News's geolocated. We've geolocated this, but I'm talking about Planet.
No, you didn't. You didn't geolocate the locations of the vehicles. You geolocated the location of the private vehicles. That does not necessarily mean that the IDF conducted a strike. We need to be very, very clear.
That's not what I'm accusing you here, Mr. Lerner. What I'm saying is the imagery that I have just pulled up on our screen, we're just going to show our audience that imagery again. It was done by Planet. Planet is a well-respected satellite imagery company. Are you disputing what they have pulled up here?
Yalda, I have nothing to add beyond the response that we've given you, that we have. From our investigation, there were no forces in that location, and therefore we can't confirm this happened. I can say that because of the severity, because of the concerns, it has been transferred to the independent of the chain of command inquiry mechanism that is established by the IDF, and they are continuing their investigation.
And so just help me understand, Mr. Lerner, you say that, from your understanding, your forces weren't there, but that is despite what we're seeing on our screens.
Yeah, but we need to work based on not what we take just by an aerial photograph that does not prove the line of sight, does not necessarily clarify that these are actually military vehicles. They could be anything. You can't identify this from the aerial photograph you're showing.
Then what? So why did you put out a press release to say that you were
put an accusatory tone to me? I really want to be here, and I'm here in the interview, and I'm saying from our investigation, we were not able to determine IDF presence on that day in this location. I don't know where this or who this or what date it actually was taken. Of course, the IDF has conducted extensive military operations throughout the Gaza Strip, almost everywhere. And there are, and as you showed in one of those videos, in different locations. And it's also important to note that, and it is important, that on the 7th of October last year, in ambulances, Hamas terrorists, the Nukhba forces, penetrated into Israel or came to the Erez crossing and launched their attacks from within ambulances.
And Mr. Lerner, I want you to be here, and we've invited you here so that you can respond and you get your chance to respond. And of course, we have covered what happened on that horrific day on October 7 in detail. But I just want to talk to you about this particular incident. In terms of what we have geolocated, I just want to talk you through what we have geolocated. We geolocated the car. It was taken an hour after the Palestinian Red Crescent were told it was clear to enter.
And as we said, there was no need for coordination there because there was no IDF forces. So we, as you said, and in the report, the whole concept of the coordination is disputed because there was no need for coordination. There has only been.
But this was an active military zone, and you know the Palestinian Red Crescent can't just enter these zones if it's an active military zone that the IDF.
There are
controls.
thousands of movements
and based on this,
of ambulances. No, there are thousands of movements every single day in the Gaza Strip. So that's not true. In this case, there was no coordination. As I said, this is from our investigation, from what we understand today. And you know, I hope if there is something else, if we have come to a different conclusion, that we will come forward and make it very, very clear. I can say that there are over 70 investigations of the IDF, of the military police, of perhaps potential crimes, criminal actions that the IDF is conducting. This is not one of them because we were not able to find in that. But when we have cases, whether it's the breach of the laws of armed conflict or looting or excessive use of violence, these types of things, then it happens.
It has been 253 days since this incident where Hind Rajab was killed. How long does this investigation take?
I can't comment on specifics. You know, each individual investigation is based on what evidence you have on the types of forces, who was the forces. As I said, there is no investigation, military police investigation in this case, because there has been no identification of wrongdoing on behalf of the military. The incident itself is being investigated by a separate mechanism.
Tell us about this press release, which was put out to say that you were conducting operations in the area, that you were present there. We're just looking at that press release now. And then the press release completely disappeared off your sites.
Yalda, I don't know. If I would have known before the interview, I would have looked into it. I really don't know.
So basically, I just want to make it clear that the satellite imagery that Planet, a very respected satellite imagery company that has conducted all sorts of investigations when it comes to Ukraine, for example, and some of the incidents that we've seen in Ukraine in places like Bucha. We've seen them conduct investigations in China and what's been going on with the Uyghurs there, for example. They have also given us this satellite imagery, and you're disputing what they're saying, that there was military presence on that day.
I'm saying that our investigation found that there was no military presence on that day. Despite that, we've passed it on to the independent investigation mechanism to try and determine if there was. And if they come to a different conclusion, they will pass it on to the Military Advocate General that will look into it, and if needs be, will open an investigation.
Mr. Lerner, Antonio Guterres has said today that fundamentally there is something wrong with the way that Israel is, prosecuting this conflict. I just want to play a little clip of what he said.
There is something fundamentally wrong in the way this war is being conducted. Ordering civilians to evacuate does not keep them safe if they have no safe place to go, and no shelter, food, medicine, or water. And no place is safe in Gaza, and no one is safe. International law is unambiguous. Civilians everywhere must be respected and protected, and their essential needs must be met, including through humanitarian assistance.
Mr. Lerner, I just want you to respond to that because, of course, there's been a lot of criticism in the way in which Israel has handled this conflict over the course of the last year.
It's not really for me to respond to the UN Secretary General. What I can say from the IDF's perspective, of course, we operate within the realm of the laws of armed conflict. That's a professional responsibility that we have. Of course, unfortunately, the understanding that our enemy is taking advantage completely of these laws of armed conflict and intentionally positioning all of their weapons of terror within the civilian arena, whether it's Hezbollah in the north or Hamas in the south. That is what they've done. That is what we've shown time and time again. You've reported it extensively, where their tunnels are, where they're launching their rockets from, how they're operating. I just gave you an example of how they approached the Erez crossing when they breached into Israel on the 7th of October in an ambulance. They have no regard for the laws of armed conflict. They take advantage of the laws of armed conflict to conduct their acts of terrorism. So, of course, when the IDF operates in evacuation of a specific location, or a broader area of operations where they're planning to cooperate, this is not only against the concept of modern warfare, where the whole concept of the element of surprise,
Mr. Lerner,
you are ceding that to the enemy.
But Mr. Lerner, Israel is expected to also adhere to the laws of armed conflict.
And I would absolutely agree that we are adhering in a way which is setting a professional precedent among militaries. Of course, it doesn't. There is no excuse, and when there is wrongdoing, we come forward. We say we have presented to the public, especially in severe cases. But of course, our responsibility is to secure the safety of Israel within the laws of armed conflict. And I would absolutely argue that we are within that realm. When we are wrong, we come forward and say so. And Yalda, I think it's really important that that the enemy understands this completely, so that we would be having this discussion. If you're asking us not to fight a terrorist organization,
there's a
not to protect Israeli civilians,
on the state of
I just want to finish this little
and how it
last
should
point.
be handling.
I just want to finish this point. If you're asking us or expecting that Israel will not defend its civilians because Hamas or Hezbollah are hiding behind Gazan civilians or Lebanese civilians, there is no comparison. You can't expect us. So what we do is, yes, of course, we evacuate. Yes, what we do is we ask people to evacuate. As I said, we give our enemy an operational advantage in the battlefield by telling them basically where we're going so that they can set up their ambushes. So I would argue, yes, there are absolutely that we are responsible. We adhere to the laws of armed conflict. We hold them dearly. Our combat soldiers hold our code of ethics close to their heart. It does not change the situation that we are facing an enemy that takes that code of ethics, reads it, learns from it, and abuses it.
Mr. Lerner, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, let's speak now to the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Hassan Nasrallah. Mr. Nasrallah, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. I just want to get your reaction to what Peter Lerner was saying there and our investigation into what happened to Hind Rajab.
I wish, Yalda, you didn't have to waste your breath with an Israeli military spokesman to really get any sort of admission from them of any wrongdoing. And this is not just about Hind Rajab and her family and that horrific story, that evil that has been really inflicted on them, that shocked the world. But this is chronic. This is not just even the last 365 days. This is the last 76 years. That's more than 28,000 days. And have you ever heard of a real investigation by the Israeli army and real accountability? Can we all name an Israeli soldier who has been held accountable? We have followed only the last few weeks that the Israeli public and protests and outcries because there was some questioning about Israeli soldiers who raped Palestinian detainees inside Israeli jails. And there was a discussion in the Knesset. Can you imagine in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, is it legitimate to rape Palestinian prisoners? I mean, so you're wasting your breath. However, what is very important right now is what you have done through this investigation to establish the facts, because unfortunately Israel has denied you, the Sky and all international mainstream media, any access to the occupied territory, to Gaza particularly, because they want to do it in the dark, because they don't want you to document it. So let me commend the fact that you have invested in this and investigated this and came up with these proofs and worked with international institutions institutions to present these satellite images so the world knows that the propaganda machine is really what is at stake here right now. And what beggars belief here, Yalda, if you allow me, what really beggars belief is when you hear London or Washington, after any atrocity, including Hind Rajab, calling for Israel to investigate itself. And after your report, I think I would not want to hear London or Washington or any other government, for that matter, to call for the war criminals to investigate themselves. They will not do so. That's the simple truth. It has got to be independent investigation. It has got to be international investigation. International media like yourself has got to have access to Gaza to report the truth. Israel and its army and its government are simply a machine of lies.
Mr. Zumlot, you and I, throughout the course of this year, have spoken a lot about the situation in Gaza. You've expressed frustration when it has come to the international community, the United States, the UK, in terms of, you know, when it has come to civilian deaths, the condemnation of that. But I want to ask you about Arab nations in this region, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan. How do you think that they have approached the last year? Have you felt that they have stepped up and shown the kind of support that you feel they should have towards the situation in Gaza?
The Arab people, unprecedented. And you see their outpouring support everywhere, in the streets, in their action, in their donations, in their traffic in the social media.
I'm talking about the governments, the Saudi government, the UAE.
Well, it varies, but we have first the neighboring countries, Egypt, Jordan, and their position is very clear, and they have made absolutely bluntly clear that this cannot continue, and they are identical in our position. As for the Gulf, the big brother of the Gulf is Saudi Arabia, and you've heard Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman only a couple of weeks ago, and you may have read an article by the Saudi foreign minister in the Financial Times only a couple of days ago, saying that it is all about a Palestinian state. Without establishing a Palestinian state, Israel will never be normalized in the region, and Saudi Arabia will not normalize relations. And now the Arab world is...
Do you genuinely believe that?
Well, I don't speak on their behalf. They are saying this publicly. They are writing this in article. It's Israel that keeps trying to play around the words and they don't want to believe them simply because Israel want to press ahead with that Netanyahu plan that you can bypass the Palestinian issue. I believe the Saudis. Yes, I believe the Saudi government and the Saudi royals that they now believe wholeheartedly that nothing can be normalized, nothing can be fixed in the region without establishing a Palestinian state. And if anybody learned any lesson last year is no matter what you do, you cannot simply overlook the biggest elephant in the room, that is the Palestinian issue. And no matter how much Netanyahu tries to be like a magician and, try to move cards and move goalposts like he did in the last few years with the main intention of blocking the emergence of the Palestinian state. Now there is energy from the region. You may have followed about the alliance announced by Saudi Arabia, by the way, an alliance for establishing a Palestinian state, an alliance that will go and encourage countries like the UK and the US to recognize the state of Palestine, an alliance that will go to the UN to admit Palestine as a full member state, an alliance that will go into an international peace conference to implement international resolutions rather than negotiate them, and an alliance that will provide assurances and guarantees security, economic and political and what have you to all sides, including Israel. So yes, we see energy to try and take us into a different path than where Netanyahu wants to take us. And think about it, Yalda, what Israel has achieved. In what sense? Militarily or economically or politically? Does Israel have a plan? What's the end game for Netanyahu? What is it? I tell you, if it's security experts, real experts, will tell you that they have created a huge, humongous security issue for Israel. And if it's really about being part of the region, my God, you really want to bomb your existence in the region, bombing all regional cities, Beirut, Gaza, Iraq, Yemen, and what have you. If Israel wants to be part of this region and relate to the region, the formula is very well known. There is the Arab Peace Initiative that tells Israel the way forward, and there is no other formula. That formula, quit your occupation, particularly in light of the clear ruling by the International Court of Justice that Israel's presence in the occupied territory is unlawful. Israeli settlements, all of them are unlawful, including in Jerusalem. They must be dismantled, and any third party must cease any support for Israeli unlawful practices. This is the way forward. We need multilateralism and international momentum to take us in that direction.
Mr. Zumlot, we've run out of time, but thank you for joining us here on the programme. Stay with us on The World after the break. We've got lots more coming up. Is Iran the enemy? That was the message, or rather, he's saying Iran is the enemy. That was the message from the head of the MI5 today, who warned the state's capabilities stretch far beyond the Middle East. I'll ask a former spy chief for his thoughts. Stay with us.
And now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
The biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with your eye.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back to Jerusalem. Well, today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed Israel has killed the man seen as the new leader of Hezbollah. It came as Beirut was being hammered with airstrikes, and movements on the ground in Lebanon seem to be picking up pace. Well, currently, the military says it's expanding its operation across the border. These are the most recent airstrikes recorded over the country, supposedly the strikes that killed the man believed to replace Nasrallah and lead Hezbollah's fight against Israel. Attention is turning to southwest Lebanon, where Israeli soldiers are making ground. Residents have been told to stay off southern beaches and fishermen told to stay clear of the sea south of the Awali River. In response, Hezbollah pelted 180 rockets at northern Israel today, including its heaviest attack yet on the port city of Haifa. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes has this.
Israel making a mark inside southern Lebanon. Soldiers appear to raise their flag in a border village. The military claims to have taken control of what they call a Hezbollah compound here. A soldier says this was a launcher armed with mortar rounds and other munitions aimed towards Israel. Commanders are widening a ground offensive across the border inside Lebanon. The Prime Minister urged the Lebanese people to stand with Israel against Hezbollah, even though Israeli warplanes have brought such terror to their homes.
Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel also has a right to win, and Israel will win. We've degraded Hezbollah's capabilities. We took out thousands of terrorists, including Nasrallah himself, and Nasrallah's replacement, and the replacement of his replacement.
One of the people he appears to be referring to is Hashem Safiuddin, who's not been heard from publicly since an airstrike last week. Yet, if a goal of Israel's mission is to stop Hezbollah from firing rockets into this country, then the threat has only grown. The northern city of Haifa, one of many to be targeted. Damage like this is why tens of thousands of Israelis have fled their homes in the past year. Hezbollah's acting leader vowing to stop them from ever returning.
Netanyahu says he wants to return the settlers to their homes in the north. We say to him that the number of displaced people will more than double.
It means the fight is only set to intensify.
Even as Israel expands its ground operation inside Lebanon, the world is waiting to see how it will respond to Iran's missile strikes on this country a week ago today, with fears growing that the retaliation could prompt a counter-strike from Iran, pushing this region ever closer to all-out war.
A hugely dangerous prospect that hangs over both sides' every move. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Northern Israel.
Well, let's go live to our correspondents now. In a moment, Mark Stone will tell us all about the Israeli Defence Minister calling off a trip to Washington. But let's go to our Alex Rossi, who joins us from Beirut. And Alex, as we're seeing there in Deborah's piece, I mean, the concern here was that Israel had maintained that this would be a limited incursion, but already we're seeing it expand.
Yalda, good evening from Beirut. Yeah, that's right. People here are extraordinarily worried, really, about what will come next. They have seen what has already happened in many of these places in southern Lebanon. And, of course, they are now seeing that soldiers from a 4th Division have also joined the invading force in the south of the country. What we don't have, of course, is the number of Israeli troops involved. The IDF says it won't give that information out because it doesn't want to help Hezbollah, but certainly it does appear to many people as though Israel's invasion is expanding. And as a corollary of that, of course, you look at what happens with the escalation ladder. Naim Qassam, the deputy leader of Hezbollah, is threatening really more rockets to rain down on northern Israeli towns and cities as a result. He says that Hezbollah fighters will not be forced away, will not be giving up on their aim of repelling that Israeli invasion. So you have something of a standoff that doesn't really show any signs of going away. And the bigger picture, of course, hanging over this region is what will the Israeli response to the Iranian attack mean? Again, will that be another step up the escalation ladder? And if it is there a counterstrike from the Iranians? And how does any of that give you a place where you may have an off-ramp with which you could de-escalate this crisis? At the moment, the picture here is looking pretty grim.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, thank you so much. Let's go straight to Mark, who joins us from Washington. Mark, all afternoon there were rumours circulating here that, of course, the rift between the Israeli defence minister and the prime minister is getting wider. The defence minister was planning on coming to Washington to meet his counterpart to discuss all of these issues, namely the strike that they're planning and preparing for on Iran. That trip has now been called off. For now.
Yeah, this is a curious one. Late last week, or at the weekend perhaps, we learnt that the Israeli Defense Minister Gallant was planning to come to Washington tomorrow to meet with his American counterpart Lloyd Austin at the Pentagon. Today it was announced that that trip has been postponed, cancelled, whichever word you choose. I think this reflects certainly tension between the Israelis and the Americans that we have seen going back many months now, but also potentially tension between Mr. Gallant, who you can see there, and Prime Minister Netanyahu as well. Remember, Netanyahu has attempted to fire Gallant a couple of times over the course of the past year. Now, we're getting very little information. The Pentagon has confirmed, indeed, that the trip is off, but they haven't said why. They have said that the trip was initiated by the Israeli side over the course of the past few days. The suggestion appears to be that Prime Minister Netanyahu has vetoed the trip, has stopped it from happening because it is suggested they have not yet completely decided how to retaliate against Iran, and that when they have made that decision, it will be Netanyahu perhaps that travels here, or at least speaks to President Biden. And I think the key to all this is a conversation between Biden and Netanyahu. Remember, Biden does not want to see a major attack on Iran. Netanyahu, on the other hand, well, he sees an opportunity like he has never seen before. For many decades, he has wanted to take out the Iranian leadership effectively, because he sees them as the malign influence behind all of this. He sees now that he has an opportunity that he hasn't had before. But this is certainly a curious moment.
It is indeed. Mark, thank you so much. Well, here in Israel, it seems all we've been talking about for much of this conflict is, of course, Iran. Well, this time last week, Israel was under attack from the air. Rockets were raining down on Jerusalem, in some places penetrating the country's anti-missile defense system. It seems a constant back and forth. When will Iran retaliate? When will Israel retaliate? There is no denying Iran stands as a major threat in the region, but it seems we're only just scratching the surface when it comes to their influence around the globe. Just have a listen to what the head of MI5 said earlier today.
Since January 2022, with police partners, we have responded to 20 Iran-backed plots presenting potentially lethal threats to British citizens and UK residents. As events unfold in the Middle East, we will give our fullest attention to the risk of an increase in or a broadening of Iranian state aggression here in the UK. So to those tempted to carry out such acts, I say this: if you take money from Iran, Russia or any other state to carry out illegal acts in the UK, you will bring the full weight of the national security apparatus down on you. It's a choice you'll regret.
Well, I'm joined now by Sir Richard Dearlove, a former chief of MI6. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. What we've heard throughout the last week is, given the way that Iran launched those ballistic missiles here on Israel, that Israel would respond. Are you concerned about all-out confrontation and what that will mean for the wider region?
Yes, I am. I think that Israel is definitely going to respond. They're not going to follow Biden's attempt to influence their behavior. So there's an expectation that this will escalate and will get more complicated and more difficult. And I don't think at the moment there's an apparent way out of that.
I mean, do you feel that Israel has no choice but to respond? You know, because in this region, I mean, when you speak to Israeli officials, they say by not responding, that in itself is a sign of weakness.
Well, I think it's got to a point now where Israel really are obliged to reply. There has been a year of relative restraint with Hezbollah firing rockets into Israel, with Israeli response, but the response has been restrained. But we've all seen the passage of events over the last 6 to 8 weeks, and quantitatively, the whole thing has shifted up several gears. So I think the prospects look pretty bleak, and I think Netanyahu sees an opportunity to destabilize the leadership of Iran. And I think one can understand why he's taking that view and making that interpretation of the circumstances.
Is this the right approach, though? I mean, given it could reshape the whole of the Middle East?
Well, if you ask my personal opinion, I think that the theocracy in Iran is at the basis of a lot of the trouble and the violence in the Middle East. They have been conducting conflict through proxies. We all know the details. Houthi, Hezbollah, Iraqi militia, Hamas, and they have used this to fight what I would describe as arm's length conflict. So they themselves are not directly involved, but there has been a sort of steering hand by the Quds force, which is part of the IRGC, in arming, training, developing all these capabilities. And it's quite clear that the current leadership in Iran, I mean, they identify themselves as having a policy to attempt to obliterate the state of Israel. So I think we're getting to a point where the sort of sequence of conflict that we've seen over 10 to 15 years in the Middle East, where there's been a compromise, a build-up to a new conflict, a new set of violence, another compromise. Maybe on this occasion, Israel appear to have called Iran's bluff. And Iran's policy of fighting through proxies looks to be, I wouldn't say in tatters, but to be seriously undermined.
So Richard Dearlove, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you, Yalda.
Well, do stay with us. We've got lots more coming up on the programme. But I want to step away for a moment on the situation here in the Middle East and focus on the United States, where almost the entirety of Florida's west coast is on hurricane alert. Hurricane Milton has passed over Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, where more than 1 million people have been ordered to evacuate. It's expected to have winds of up to 180 miles per hour when it hits the shores in the Tampa Bay area on Florida's west coast tomorrow. It's due to make landfall as a Category 4 storm, just days after Hurricane Helene caused more than 200 deaths and widespread devastation across several states, including Florida. Well, our US correspondent James Matthews is in Tampa and sent us this report.
From a distance, it's quite the picture. This is the image of Hurricane Milton from space. It is out there, and it's coming here. In Florida, they know hurricanes, but they haven't known one like this in a while. Hurricane Milton threatens to be one of the strongest ever to hit the Panhandle state. Only 5 Atlantic hurricanes have ever been stronger. Mass evacuations are underway from land in its path. Wind speeds that have touched 180 miles an hour threaten a so-called storm surge, water thrown ashore at a depth of up to 15 feet. They are eye-watering figures.
It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just...
Literally in the case of one weather presenter who was brought to tears. The timing of this coming storm could hardly be worse. It's the Category 5 2 weeks after the Category 4, Hurricane Helene, that claimed the lives of more than 230 people. Milton is heading towards parts of Florida that Helene has already hit. The double hit carries an added danger. This is debris left in the wake of Hurricane Helene. The worry is that when Milton makes landfall, the winds will turn the likes of this into projectiles, causing danger to life and blocking roads for emergency crew. And then there are the politics. Donald Trump is driving claims that disaster funds are being spent on immigrants. It's firmly rejected by relief coordinators and President Biden. He's cancelled a planned trip this week to Germany and Angola.
If you're under evacuation orders, you should evacuate now. You should have already evacuated. It's a matter of life and death, and that's not hyperbole. It's a matter of life and death.
They are the politics of disaster that could yet play into the election next month. In Florida, surviving the next few days is the primary concern.
And James joins us now. And James, just looking at your report, as you say, the primary concern now is really staying safe in this moment.
Hi, Yalda. Yeah, staying safe, survival, nothing less. I mean, I think people were given a sharp reminder about the potential for the loss of life come the hurricanes. Last week, when Hurricane Helene hit, it killed more than 230 people, and we were at that sandbagging today, and I was struck by how many people said normally we wouldn't go to this length because we have avoided the hurricanes, and the warnings really haven't come home to hit us in the past, but this time we saw it with Helene, so we see the danger. People got the reality check last week. It's just started raining here. I'm just off Tampa Bay, Yalda. Perhaps you can see the darkening cloud behind me. The rain certainly has just started in the past half hour. Hurricane Milton due to make landfall tomorrow during the night, so there is still some time for people to get their act together. The big fear, of course, is the speed of the wind. It has hit 180 miles an hour. That creates a storm surge up to 15 feet. To give you an idea of what that is, I'm in amongst the palm trees here. If you take a look up the trunk, 15 feet is where the branches start, so that's the danger. That is the height, potentially, of water that will come ashore here on the coastline and will travel far inland. That caused loss of life 2 weeks ago with Hurricane Helene, and that is the clear concern this time. That's why large parts of the Panhandle state are under warning, are subject to evacuation orders, and those who don't have properties elsewhere, they've been corralled into high schools and the like, shelters where they can sit out the storm, which is literally a matter of life and death. We've had that warning from the president down today, and I can tell you, looking at empty streets and empty properties, that it is a warning so far that seems to be widely heeded, Yalda.
James, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Well, let's bring you back to events here in the Middle East, and they're moving very fast. It can, I know, be hard to keep track of everything going on. So myself and my friend and fellow foreign correspondent Richard Engel from NBC News are getting together each week on our new podcast. It's called The World, to try and cut through some of the noise and make sense of the week's global events. The first episode is out tomorrow, and I'm excited to show you a little first look. Here we are talking about what Israel's response to the Iranian missile attack could mean for the upcoming US elections. Have a look.
Are they going to hit the oil industry? Are they going to hit the nuclear facilities? By the way, if they hit the oil industry, it has a huge impact on the US election. You know, they hit the oil industry. Some analysts have said there's an immediate shock of like $20 a barrel that immediately leads to gas prices go up. A few weeks before the election, suddenly gas prices are up. That's not good for Harris. It helps Trump. He could say, look at the chaos here. I would fix all of this. So there are real consequences of what might happen for an Israeli reprisal.
There will be some in the United States who think, yeah, go in, smash Iran, cut them down and reshape this region. But as you say, that feels very much like a very simplistic, naive approach to resolving what feels at this point so deep and unresolvable in this moment.
Well, Richard joins me live now from Beirut. Really good to see you, Richard. Just announcing the launch of our new podcast, which drops tomorrow. Very excited to join you on this. And of course, we've spoken a lot over the years, but to now be really dissecting events around the world, and especially during this very critical, dangerous moment for this region.
The timing couldn't be more important, more relevant. We're going to focus mostly on world affairs. It's an audience of anyone who wants to understand more about the world that we're living in, these complicated times. And we've talked about this a lot. When things get really busy, really complicated, there is a tendency for people to tune off, to look away. And that's not good. That's not good for anyone. It's not good for humanity. So if people can at least tune in, try and understand what's going on, see the world through our eyes, we have this great privileged position of traveling around, going from hotspot to hotspot, event to event. So they can come on and join us and see what we're seeing. So I'm very excited about it, and it's finally dropping tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely, wherever you get your podcast. But I've got about a minute left, Richard. But we were together in Beirut. I'm in Jerusalem now. You're still covering the events in southern Lebanon, in Beirut. We're waiting now to see whether and when Israel strikes Iran next, and how that will unfold. And that really is one of the major topics of our podcast coming out.
And I can tell you the Americans are very concerned, the Biden administration is very concerned that Netanyahu might not tell them. There's not a lot of good blood. If you see the new Bob Woodward book, and excerpts are coming out, Biden was calling him four-letter words, called him a liar, and there's a real concern that Netanyahu might act in Israel's interests, and might even act in a way that could impact the U.S. election on purpose. So there's a lot of concern about coordination and what could come.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, lots to talk about. Our podcast, The World, launches tomorrow. Richard, thank you so much. And good night from the team and I here in Jerusalem. Goodbye.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.